Yeah.
What you think about that?
He didn't do it.
Fuck out of here. All the evidence that's out there.
Listen, hold on. If they find a dead body in me and your car, and this is our car, do you think they'll let me and you stay out like long? They got out. So think about it.
Charleston White just spun the whole situation on its head and came out swinging with shocking claims. He dropped receipts nobody was even expecting, and the internet is now on edge, questioning everything they thought they knew about this case. When the story broke that human remains were discovered inside a Tesla tied to 20-year-old rising music star David, social media went into full meltdown mode. Before the facts were even clear, fingers were pointing everywhere. The media had already branded David as guilty, fans were tearing his lyrics apart for clues, and major brands started cutting ties with him instantly to protect their image. But right in the middle of that chaos, Charleston White stormed onto the scene, loud, raw, and unfiltered, saying what nobody else dared to say. David didn't do it! And the wildest part, he actually brought receipts to back it up. Charleston highlighted something no one could dismiss. There were no charges filed at all. In his eyes, that spoke volumes. In America, he said, black men get locked up off nothing. If they had something real, David would be in handcuffs already. And honestly, he's not lying. We see people get scooped up every day with half the proof or no proof at all. For Charleston, the silence from police wasn't a sign of a huge secret investigation, but proof they had nothing solid. And now everybody's asking the same question. What does Charleston know that the rest of us don't? And why isn't anyone else saying it out loud? To Charleston, that silence from the law meant one thing. They had absolutely nothing. And to really drive it home, he hit the internet with one of his signature analogies, raw and bold, meant to snap people out of the hype. He said flat out, if this was just some regular dude and not a rising star, he'd already be sitting in a cell yesterday. And honestly, he had a point. If there was any real link, why is David still on stage, still booking shows, still moving around with no restrictions? No arrest, no court date, no mugshot. Charleston argued that alone spoke louder than any wild conspiracy floating online, but he didn't stop there. Charleston took direct shots at the internet's so-called evidence. The leaked photos, the girl's age, the tattoos people swore matched, even fans twisting his lyrics into supposed hidden confessions. To Charleston, it all looked too staged, too picture perfect, messy, or almost like somebody wanted David to look guilty without ever proving a thing. And he laid it out clearly. The math wasn't adding up. A young black artist, allegedly tied to a missing 14-year-old, yet not a single charge, not even held overnight. To him, that was impossible to ignore. Charleston told folks to look deeper. Maybe the silence wasn't failure. Maybe it was proof David wasn't who they were painting him to be. He even tossed the question no one else dared to ask. What if this whole thing was a setup?
All the circumstantial evidence they found on OJ, they placed it. So you mean to tell me they got all of this on this and he still get to move freely amongst America?
He pointed out how the body was hidden, how the details seemed too carefully placed for someone like David to pull off. And that's when the internet exploded. His words spread across X, YouTube, and IG, with people split right down the middle. Some said Charleston was going way too far defending something that couldn't be defended. But others, they claimed he was the only one bold enough to say what everyone else was too scared to admit. This whole case just wasn't adding up, and Charleston didn't treat it like a one-and-done comment. He stayed on it, circling back again and again, pushing the issue until people had no choice but to question it. The fact that David was walking around free didn't just confuse him, it made the entire situation look sideways. To prove his point, Charleston went all the way back to one of the most infamous trials in history, the OJ case. And it wasn't just for shock value, he used it as a warning. His message was simple. When the authorities want you locked up, they'll move fast, even if the evidence is paper thin. So then he asked the question that stopped people cold. If the evidence on David was so strong, why weren't there any cuffs? Hearing it like that made everything feel suspicious. Was someone really trying to bring David down? Or was the truth being drowned out by noise? Charleston started tossing out raw theories straight from the gut with no filter and no sugarcoating. He didn't buy the official story at all, and he wasn't shy about saying it. These weren't polished legal takes. They were street-level emotional thoughts, sharp and explosive like firecrackers in a quiet room. That's why people paid attention. Charleston wasn't quoting court papers. He was speaking from the heart, bold and unapologetic. and he made one thing clear. The whole idea of David being tied to that 14-year-old girl didn't sit right with him. He mocked the so-called proof the tattoo people kept obsessing over. Just because two people have the same ink, he said, doesn't mean they're connected. Fans online swore that little matching symbol on their fingers was the smoking gun, but Charleston wasn't buying it. To him, it looked more like folks forcing a headline than presenting real evidence.
So I'm saying, let me think outside the box. Maybe his mama done it. Maybe her mama done it and set him up. Maybe one of them racist uncles or cousins don't like her. Maybe the other boyfriend done it. Maybe the pimp who was sex trafficking her for the last year when she ran away done it. And I know they said, man, he wrong for calling her a little hoe, but she was. Little girl don't run away from home, little hoes and little.
Then came the line that shook the internet. Charleston aimed his words directly at the girl involved, and the way he said it set social media on fire with outrage. Cold, no sympathy. But for Charleston, it wasn't about disrespect. It was about forcing people to look twice at a story that felt way too easy. Critics came at him heavy, accusing him of blaming someone who couldn't even speak for herself, saying he had crossed the line. But others defended him, arguing Charleston was the only one bold enough to push folks into seeing a side the media refused to touch. Charleston White has never cared about comfort. He cares about what he calls the truth, even if it makes people squirm. And for him, the biggest red flag was clear, and he repeated it again and again. They don't let black men walk from this kind of stuff, not in America. That line spread like wildfire across socials. To Charleston, it was the most solid logic there was. If David really did all that, Charleston said, he wouldn't be walking free. That's what made him stand out. While others obsessed over lyrics and tattoos, Charleston zoomed out and hit people with the hardest question: why is this man still free? He wasn't doing it for clout. He was breaking down a system he's always said was designed to break young black men. This wasn't just about one case. It was about a bigger pattern. He had seen it happen too many times. Young black men get blamed instantly, judged even faster. So when this case dragged on with no charges, Charleston called it for what it looked like: suspicious. By this point, Charleston wasn't just raising questions, he was daring the world to prove him wrong. He spoke like someone who's watched injustice his whole life, and to him, nothing here made sense. A teen found in David's Tesla, alleged connections, lyrics being picked apart like riddles, and still no arrest. Charleston looked at the same details everyone else saw and flat out said they proved nothing. In fact, he argued it was the excess of so-called evidence that made it all feel staged. Charleston completely flipped the script. He argued that if David was really guilty, the system would have pounced on him instantly, especially with him being a young black man in the spotlight. That silence wasn't mercy, he said. It was a sign something way deeper was at play. Then Charleston went straight for the jugular with the question nobody else dared to ask. What if this wasn't even David's mess at all? What if it's staged to look perfect, but it's fake? He asked. Those what ifs lit the internet on fire. Some folks slammed him as reckless, while others leaned in hard because, let's be real, setups in the world of fame are not rare, and Charleston knew how to keep that tension burning, circling back to one fact he wouldn't let people ignore: David is still free. Meanwhile, rumors swirled. People were saying he dated a 13-year-old, pointing at photos, whispering about supposed links. But Charleston hit back with one simple question: you really think if all that was real, police wouldn't have him locked up already? His answer was firm: David didn't do it. That was his hill, and he was ready to take all the heat that came with it. Critics tore him apart, accusing him of dismissing a child's story and making excuses, but Charleston didn't flinch. He never does. He lives in controversy and doesn't run from the fire. He runs toward it. He told people to think back on every case where young black men got yanked off the streets on nothing but rumors, locked up on maybes. And now here's David with cars, songs, photos, headlines tying him to scandal, yet still free. Charleston swore that wasn't luck. That was proof. And even if millions online didn't agree, they had to admit one thing: he made people question the narrative. But Charleston's defense of David wasn't random. To really understand why his words went so viral, you gotta understand who Charleston White is. This ain't just some loud voice online. He's lived through chaos, and that's why his words hit different. He laid it all out. Born in Texas, 1977. By the time he was just 14, his life had already spun out of control. One night outside a Foot Locker, things went violent. A man lost his life, and Charleston, while still just a teenager, was charged as an adult. He sat behind bars until he was 21, and that moment changed everything. For some people, it defined him forever. They say with a past like that, he's got no business speaking on right or wrong. But Charleston sees it the opposite way. To him, that story is exactly why he can speak. He knows what it feels like to get thrown into the system with no lifeline. He knows how fast things move when you're young, black, and given no grace. So when Charleston says David might be innocent, he's not just running his mouth, he's speaking from scars and lived experience. His entire brand comes from that one life-altering mistake as a teen. That's the fire fueling everything he says. After prison, he tried to flip the script, turning himself into an activist. He even launched HOPO, Hypocrisy Over Politics, aimed at keeping kids away from gangs and the street life. For a moment, it looked like he was chasing redemption, using his own mess to help others dodge the trap. But Charleston was never built for quiet redemption. He's loud, he's messy, and he thrives off shaking things up. By the 2020s, that's exactly what he was doing. Louder than ever, putting his name on the map by going at everybody. Rappers, politicians, entire communities. Nobody was safe. Whether it was T.I., Boozy, or whoever else, Charleston used their names to fuel his message and stir up chaos. And he didn't stop at just calling them out. He dragged their families, questioned their parenting, and clowned their reputations. Every call out went viral. Every feud brought more clicks. And every time people were forced to ask, is this man speaking truth or is he just chasing clout? One of the wildest moments, Charleston's beef with streamer Adin Ross. In 2023, he straight up pepper sprayed one of Ross's crew on camera. No filter, no warning, just pure chaos. The internet exploded, legal threats started flying, and Charleston loved every second of the storm. Then came the comedy show incident. Instead of de-escalating hecklers in the crowd, Charleston pulled out stacks of cash and taunted them like a ringmaster in a circus. To some, his antics are comedy gold. To others, they're proof he's no activist at all, just a man addicted to shock and spotlight. But that's exactly why people can't stop watching. He's a walking contradiction. One day he's bashing gangs and preaching accountability. The next, he's mocking tragedies online and laughing about lives lost. In September 2025, Charleston went viral again after blasting Charlie Kirk's family right after his death. He called it white-on-white crime and laughed, cold, ruthless, but classic Charleston. And that's his entire brand. Part critic, part chaos agent, always unpredictable. So when he turned his attention to David's case, everybody stopped to listen. Not just because of what he was saying, but because it was him saying it. Charleston's name carries weight. His voice doesn't whisper, it claps. And this time, his target wasn't just a rapper or politician, it was the system itself. By the time he stood behind David, Charleston already had a messy resume. Viral rants, endless scandals, feuds that made headlines everywhere. He wasn't some outsider stepping in, he was the controversy. His involvement made everything louder, way louder. Earlier in 2024, he sparked outrage after mocking the deaths of King Von and Takeoff. He didn't just mention them, he laughed, dismissing their legacies as the natural end of the streets. That was the breaking point for many. That's when Charleston stopped being seen as a reformed activist and fully embraced being a professional troublemaker. Then came his fiery feud with Boozy Badazz. Charleston didn't just diss him, he went for his jugular, attacking his fatherhood and claiming Boozy was setting his kids up for the same chaos he once lived himself. That feud cut deep, and when Boozy clapped back, Charleston only turned the heat up. He threw out threats that danced on the line between jokes and something dead serious. To him, it was just being real, but to others, it sounded like straight harassment. And Charleston didn't stop with rappers. Even the police weren't safe. He called out departments, mocked police chiefs, and even bragged he'd shoot back if cops ever came for him. This from the same man who constantly preached against gang life, yet hopped on live flashing weapons and stirring beef like it was a game. The contradictions never ended, but somehow, Charleston thrived in the chaos. By 2025, he wasn't just an activist anymore. He had become a walking headline. Whether it was trolling rappers, waving guns on Instagram, or dragging celebrities through the mud, Charleston made sure his name stayed hot. He turned controversy into currency, and interviews proved it. So when he suddenly started defending David, critics didn't even blink. They rolled their eyes and said, here he goes again. To them, it wasn't about seeking truth, it was about clicks. And let's be real, a rising pop star caught in a scandal, that's prime content for someone like Charleston, but Charleston didn't whisper his defense. He blasted it across YouTube, TikTok, and X, where millions tuned in. One clip stripped of context went viral instantly. Some laughed, Others agreed, and a flood of comments all echoed the same thing. I don't like Charleston, but he's not lying. That's his wild power. Folks may hate him, but they can't stop watching. His reputation stays under fire, but somehow his voice only gets louder. And when he stood up for David, people had to listen. Not because he's polished, but because he's raw, unpredictable, and unfiltered. But for Charleston, this wasn't just about David's name, this was personal. Charleston saw himself in the young star, another black teen caught in a system that moves fast and shows no mercy. At 14, Charleston had been there, locked up for a mistake that haunted him for life. So when he looked at David, he didn't just see a headline, he saw a mirror. For years, Charleston's been telling people America doesn't wait for proof when it comes to black youth. They don't hesitate. That's why he kept hammering the same line. They don't let black men walk free from stuff like this. To Charleston, David still being free could only mean one thing. It wasn't real, because if the system had been certain, David would have been gone already. In his eyes, the fact that David was still walking meant something was off beneath the noise. David, like Charleston once was a young black man trapped in a story he didn't write, and whether guilty or not, the world had already judged him. That hit deep for Charleston because he knew exactly what that felt like. And here's the irony. The same man who mocked dead rappers, clowned victims, and stirred up chaos for fun was suddenly standing as a so-called protector of justice. Whether people bought it or not, it made the whole case impossible to ignore. Charleston wasn't just defending David, he was defending himself, his past, his pain, and his core belief that the system only shows mercy when it wants to. But as Charleston's words kept spreading, the case itself only got murkier. New rumors, fresh leaks, strange updates, and then came the bombshell. The victim's identity was confirmed. Authorities revealed the body in the Tesla was indeed the missing 14-year-old girl. Her remains were hidden in the trunk, carefully concealed like someone wanted them to stay buried. It sounded like the final piece of the puzzle, but even then, police repeated the same line again and again. No arrests have been made at this time. The whole case turned into fuel for content. TikTok sleuths picked apart David's tracks, especially Romantic Homicide, treating the lyrics like secret confessions. Music videos were slowed frame by frame as fans searched for hidden clues. Others lined up his tour stops with a girl's disappearance hunting for overlap. But with all that digging, nothing solid ever surfaced. No DNA match, no eyewitness, no confirmed digital trail, just whispers, rumors, and way too many TikTok theories. Still, the case wasn't frozen. Behind the curtain, detectives were grinding, tracing phone pings, digging into text logs, even coordinating across states since the car and the body had reportedly crossed lines before being found. And that's where Charleston's voice got risky. By going public and claiming David was innocent, Charleston wasn't just defending him, he was reshaping the narrative in real time. Millions tuned in, and soon fans started repeating his words. Hashtags like #FreeDavid and #Charleston said it exploded on X. That's the wild power of viral content. It doesn't just spread the news, it rewrites it. In David's case, Charleston became the loudest pen in the room, and it didn't stop on social media. His videos got so huge that mainstream outlets couldn't ignore him anymore. Suddenly, reporters chasing hard evidence were forced to mention Charleston White, a man with no badge, no law degree, no insider access, just a mic and a massive reach. Overnight, opinion pieces flooded in. Some slammed Charleston as reckless, accusing him of tampering with an open case by declaring innocence without hard proof. Others admitted he might have a point. No arrest? That wasn't nothing. Love him or hate him, one thing was crystal clear. Charleston had yanked the case into an even louder, messier spotlight, and fans quickly split into two fierce camps. On one side were David's loyal followers, many of them young and emotional, treating Charleston's words like gospel. They quoted him, stitched his clips, and echoed his core message. If he really did it, he'd be locked up already. On the other side, critics slammed Charleston, saying his take disrespected the girl and her grieving family. Social media turned into an all-out war zone. Fights, arguments, even users doxing each other just for having different opinions. What should have stayed a quiet investigation exploded into non-stop chaos online. Brands felt the heat too. Some companies had already backed away from David, but now they were frozen in place. Drop him completely and risk losing fans, or wait it out in case Charleston was right and David walked free? Endorsement deals hit pause. His whole image was left dangling, not canceled, not cleared, just stuck in limbo. Meanwhile, law enforcement stayed quiet. They never called Charleston out by name, but subtle pushback started leaking. Investigators hinted they were still grinding behind the scenes, digging through texts, messages, footage, and witness accounts. Anonymous voices whispered the same thing. No arrest didn't mean innocence, it just meant prosecutors didn't want to rush and lose in court. But Charleston flipped that. To him, every delay, every no comment, every vague press statement was proof of a cover-up. He swore the silence wasn't strategy, it was desperation. And the longer they stalled, the louder his voice got. The internet echoed his question over and over. Why hasn't David been charged? And nobody had a straight answer. This wasn't just about David anymore. It was about race, justice, fame, and who really gets to decide guilt when viral voices drown out official ones. And leading that charge, not a judge, not a cop, not a lawyer, but Charleston White himself. As weeks stretched into months, the investigation stopped being just a police matter. It became a mirror of us. How we treat celebrity scandals, how we chase headlines, and how fast we judge without facts. Charleston was louder than law enforcement, bolder than legal experts, and more viral than journalists trying to stick to the facts. Behind the noise, detectives kept digging quietly, following digital trails, linking evidence across state lines. But to David's fans, none of that mattered as much as Charleston's words. Flawed or not, his voice gave people something to hold on to, a script to fight back against headlines. And in today's digital age, sometimes the story hits harder than the facts. No proof, no cuffs. That silence kept echoing louder than any piece of evidence. The case isn't closed, the truth is still foggy, but one thing's undeniable. Charleston didn't just jump on a viral story, he remixed the whole beat. He made David's innocence as loud as the crime claims, turning speculation into fuel, debates into viral content, and content into power. Now David's career hangs in the balance. Die-hard fans fight for him while the industry stays scared to make a move. Labels don't know which way to go. Brands are stuck, and law enforcement is under pressure. Because if they push forward without solid proof, Charleston's been loud enough to flip it into major backlash. And for the public, this is the wake-up call. A reminder of how quickly truth can get buried under clicks, edits, and viral noise. So now I'll ask you, what do you think about Charleston White's defense of David? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on those notifications. We'll be back with the next chapter real soon.